Okay, are you guys able to see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, everyone. Thank you, Samra, on OT security. So, guys, today next section will be on partition review. So, myself, Sukesh Shetty. So, I'm working in a cybersecurity company named Network, and this is my Twitter handle mentioned over here. So, what would be today's takeaway from the session? So, we will be learning about firewall basics. Second, what would the benefits of firewall audit? Third, how to perform a firewall, and last one, in a similar fashion, how to conduct a firewall rule set review. The first one would be firewall basics. So what is firewall? So firewall basically is a network security device which is placed an internal network and that will monitor incoming network traffic and which will decide whether to allow a block on a defined set of security rules. Now this rule is nothing but which contains source, destination, services, and action, whether to allow or deny that particular rules. Now, firewalls can be a hardware, a software, or it can be both. Now, it is basically based on the principle of least privilege and need to know basis. That means if we want to allow particular traffics, that can be allowed based on the limited access privilege. Now, it always operates on a first man basis. That is like it works on a top down approach. Whichever rules that hit first, that will be allowed. And if you have another rule designed for the same source or destination, that won't be allowed because a particular route which has been designed first, that will be allowed. Now there are different types of firewalls. Examples: Cisco ASA, Checkpoint, Fortinet, Palo Alto, and there are many others in the market. Now, what is the benefits of having or doing a firewall audit? The first one majorly is doing kind of a firewall hardening. It does do a end-to-end firewall hardening review. Second, we are able to and objects. Thirdly, we are also able to identify and remove the shadow rules, duplicate rules, and expire rules, which we would be covering in the upcoming steps. And the fourth one important is like we'll be able to do a optimizations by performing all kind of this firewall reviews. And majorly, the most important part is regarding the we are able to detect the overly permissive rules which are being set on the firewalls. So these are basically the benefits of doing a firewall audit. So next point is related to how to conduct a firewall configuration review. But before going this, so we are basically focusing on doing a manual review. There are a lot of tools or solutions available in the market like Skybox, Managing, Algo6, and a lot others, which will automate your process. But today we are majorly focusing on how to conduct a manual configuration review and rule set review. So whenever you're doing a manual configuration review, point to consider is let's get a prerequisite. What all data you can get from the team. For the configuration review, you can get a firewall configuration dump. If you don't get a dump, so you can get a firewall console access with the help of a firewall admin. So what are the major pointers to check when you're doing a firewall configuration review? The first point is related to check whether your firewall has been configured to a NTP server. Now there has been a lot of questions whether we should have a public or private NTP server. So we should always have a set of servers has been synced up with the public NTP. So in case of any kind of failure or internet access failures, so you should have your own NTP server that should be synced with your firewalls, and that would be easier for us to do a later forensics or incident analysis. So second point is check all your logs or firewall logs are being sent to centralized logging server or SIM solution, which will also be used incident analysis and all. Third, we should check whether a firewall firmware has been updated to a latest version. So we should not use any kind of vulnerable version of firewalls. Fourthly, we should check the SNMP survey, which has been configured for health service and checking the monitoring and monitoring stuff for the firewall. it should be set to version 3. Version 3 is a secure protocol of SN, and we should also set a strong communicating. So the string can be public and private. We should set a custom community string over here. Next, we should check whether we should, for default admin and guest account, the guest account should by default should be disabled, and even the default admin account should be renamed to a customized account name. Next is related to the AAA, which is nothing but authentication, authorization, and accounting. Now, this is basically used for the user management for accessing resource and also for the authentication purpose. Like we have a solution like TACAX, Revious servers, which have been used for the AAA services. Now, in case if you don't have a AAA in your environment, you can check the password policy should be defined as complex as part of your organization policy. Now, the other control is related to the checking whether the internal resource who have been given access to the firewall from the outside, the remote access. So you should check whether all the resources have been given access through a VPN. So you should check whether that VPN have a limited set of users, and you should do a regular review of that VPN users. Also verify that the VPN encryption use a strong algorithm like AES, so it will be a stronger protection across the. Next point is related to HM mode, which is nothing but the high availability mode. So this is majorly important in case of any kind of failure or network failover. So if your first primary firewall fails, you should have a secondary firewall in place in case of any kind of network disaster. Next point is related to this session timeout. So this is kind of majorly related to a session timeout in case of there is no session idle timeout has been set, and this should be defined as per the organization policy, that is 15 minutes, 30 minutes, which has been approved by the management and all. And lastly, this is major related rule set review, but you should check that you should have default deny all permissions in the firewall rule set. So if you have a set of 10 rules, the 11th rule should be like deny all. You should not set it to punish all. So you should have a deny all permission set to in the end of the rules. So this is basically related to how to perform a configuration review on the firewall, a manual set of checklist to do that. So the next is related to how to perform firewall rule set review. Here also we'll have a set of prerequisites. So we'll be getting the network diagram and the asset entry. So network diagram help us to understand what are the various components in the infrastructure, what are the placements, how the network architecture has been defined, and the asset entry will help us to map what are the various different components, for example, the production environment, the UAT environment, development environments. So we'll be able to understand how the segregation and the segmentation has been done on the network level. So once we understand this, the next step is to get a firewall rule set done. If we don't get that, console access to review the rule set with the help of firewall admin. So these are basically the prerequisites you would getting or you should get from the team whenever you're doing a firewall rule set. So what are the major pointers we should check when you're doing a manual firewall rule set? Various rules you need to check, like is there any kind of insecure access rules, redundant rules, unused rules, is there any kind of large subnet rules present, whether there's a critical port access rule provided in a grouping of rules which can be related to source, destination, or service. Also, we should check for any kind of unused object in the firewall. And lastly, you should check what are the different kind of rules that has been or not logs. So let us go in detail about each rules. How should we check, and what would be the criteria to check for each and every type of rule. The first is related to insecure access rule. So when you will get to know whether the rule is insecure or not, the first major point to check is that in any column related to source, destination, or service, whether any kind of keyword, any setting where you are getting providing access to each and every within the source or destination to each and every source in the network to get access to that particular service. Even if you see any kind of service in the service section, that means any of the resource can use any of the resources in the environment. For example, the service can be 02655535. That means all the service would be available in the environment. So majorly, for example, if you check over here, the rule number 3 and 7, the from interface zone is okay. But if you see in the rule number 3, there's a service 3 that has been the service has been set to any. That means the users across the source and destination can have access to any of the. In the similar fashion, the rule number 7, the source has been set to any. That means any source can access to this destination with the any service access. So this is the first point to check for the insecure access. The next point is related to the, so when you're doing a network diagram, you will get to know, okay, what are the UI to prod environment, what are development to prod environment. But if you get to know any kind of access to UAT to prod, that means there's no a perfect network segmentation has been designed. So you can check it through the firewall rule set. If you find any kind of these rules, so you can highlight a point, and that is a major issue. So none of the UAT users or system should have access to production environment. The similar vice versa, the production should not have access to the UAT. So this can be analyzed through a network diagram and the asset inventory, which will help us here to do the insecure access rule review. So below is basically the impact. What will happen if insecure access rule problem? So it will provide coming any source and destination and service inside a firewall and putting the network security in risk in case of accidents, malicious users to get access to a critical environment in the infrastructure. Okay, the next is related to redundant rules. Now, redundant rules are nothing but similar rules as, for example, rule A has kind of same service, same source and destination in the rule B. So if you found that kind of rules, that means there is a redundant rule in the firewalls, and that will put a overhead on the firewall and will reduce the performance of the firewall. Now, for example, here the rule number 16 and rule number 16 edited group. If you see the firm interface to interface, the source destination in both the case are same. So what we can do, we can identify this kind of rules and we can tell them, okay, this is a redundant rules in the environment and it need to be removed, because only the first rule will be run, the second rule won't be run because the same rule in the environment. So what will happen in these cases? It will just provide some kind of latency, any kind of if you're searching any kind of filtering in the firewalls, it will just create some kind of extra space and time, and it will just overhead the performance of the firewall. So basically, the redundant rules should be removed as part of your cleanup. Now, what is shadow rules? Shadow rules are similar to redundant rules. The only parameter that change is related to the action. The from, source, destination, service are almost same. Just the action parameter change. That means one says it allows, another say it denies. So in case have some kind of malware or any kind of issues, so what does that net administration for a temporary basis? They deny. They create a rule called of deny for the same rules which has been designed earlier. But in the earlier state, they forgot to remove that rules. But in the later stage, what happened if they want to allow that traffic or deny, because of the action that has been permitted, the permit will be allowed and deny won't be executed. Because as I said earlier, firewall runs on a first match basis. The first rule will be executed, the other rules won't be executed at all. So this might create some kind of contradictions and it might result some kind of issues. As kind of issues are perfect or any kind of availability of particular resource in the environment. The third one is related to unused rules. So this kind of rules are designed, but they are never run in the environment. For example, they might be have created some kind of temporary purpose, and this can be identified based on the column called hits. Through the hits, you will get to know, okay, whether this rule has been run or has been just created for a temporary basis. If you some kind of rules which has got 0 hits, that means this rule has never been used. So you can remove that rules based on the approvals. because it will create some kind of overhead on the firewalls, and it might increase the search time and space requirement in the firewalls. So it will ultimately impact the performance of the firewall. So this should be removed as part of your regular cleanups of the firewall rule set. Now this is related to last subnets. So what does last subnet means? You create a rules in which you give access to whole subnet. That means you are increasing the attack surface in the network, and which will, for example, if you wanted to give access for only for 15 to 20 odd peoples in the environment, but instead of that, the network administrator provide a whole network range. Like here, it has given a whole subnet access to all the resource. So you should identify this kind of rules so that it should not create a wider area to access, because as I said earlier, firewall is used to be like a least privilege rather than giving access to whole environment. So you can identify this, you can have a chit chat with the network team and the business team why you should have access to all this environment. If they have the justification, if you have this exceptional approvals, on that basis you can go ahead. But if they don't have, then this should be limited to limited users. The similar way, there's something kind of host name that is defined. So you need to check out the host name and the particular network ID. What is the network range that has been defined in the environment? So you can't only go by the IP range, you also need the host name that has been defined in the network. What is the host name? What is the IP range that has been defined for the host name? Based on that, you can identify these last subnet rules, and that can be highlighted and that can be mitigated later. Now, the next rule type is like the critical port. So sometimes what happens, the you do have PIM and PAM kind of environment in an environment, but network administrator create a rule like port terrain that is used for remote administration, the port 22, which is used for the remote administration. As per the process, it should go by the PIM PAM, but they are not using that. Rather, they are creating direct access to the servers by creating this kind of rules. So you should check out this kind of access, and you should understand the environment. Okay, whether this rule should be allowed, whether there are larger audience who have been access to remote administration to the critical servers, that should be identified. Similar fashion, you need to check whether there's kind of telnet rules or FTP rules, the clear text protocol rules that has been enabled on the environment, because these are all critical ports which can be exploited through public known as, and which will be a serious impact on the network. So basically, you need to identify which are the critical, for example, SQL port number, the Oracle ports that need to be identified in the environment. So in this example, I have given the service like, for example, if any service is there, that means all the servers are available. Pay SQL port number, the TFTP port number. In this, there's no need of authentication. You can directly access to the servers. So this is basically the critical port access rules which need to be identified, and this is very important in the environment. You should not give any kind of critical port access to the user, especially in case of is there any kind of PIM PAM in the. Now, what is inactive rules? So now what happens is the network administrators, they create the rules, and after a particular time they make it disable. That means they are not used, but they want to keep it disabled so that in the later moment they can be used. But after 6 months or 1 year, that rule is still present. So that is rule is not removed. So basically, this rule should be removed because that will just create extra space in the house, and it will create more consumes firewall object space, and that will unnecessarily create latency in the firewall's performance and all. So basically, this rules can be identified by the column called status, which provide the status called disable. So you can ask the network firewall administrator why these rules are disabled. Is it created for a temporary disabled purpose? If it's like more than 3 months, as per the network security policies, all the unused rules should be removed in a particular period, that is 3 months or 6 months. So this kind of rules should be removed as part of your firewall rule set review. Now grouping. Now there are some rules that has been defined in the firewalls, in which if you see in this example, the from source are same. The source is a little bit different over here, but the destination, service are all same. So what you can do is that you can club the source and you can make this as a single rule rather than creating different rules. In a similar fashion, the next example also, source, destination are all same, just the service is different. So you can club into one rules rather than creating multiple rules in the firewalls and creating unnecessary firewall objects. So we can club some such kind of rules, and these kind of rules are known as grouping, in which multiple rules can be clubbed into one rather than creating a separate rule for each and every objects. So these rules are basically not lead to the powerful optimization, and basically it can just create a latency and firewall optimizations issues. Now, what is unused objects? So in a firewall, when you do a review, you see there are multiple objects that has been created in the environment, and out of that, for example, if you create 100 objects, out of them 60 to 70 objects that are regularly used, and 30 objects are not used as all. It's created for namecheck purpose, and the firewall administrator, they don't remove that issues, or they don't remove the unused object. So this can be done through manual review. What are different object that has been used? So you need to check based the name, the tunnels, and all. Check whether these objects are. This will be done through a manual and very comprehensive review where we'll get to know. So in case there are more than 300 rules, 400 rules, so it will be a very tedious task to remove that. But this can be used when we are able to identify some kind of unused rules and all, any kind of inactive rules. So that objects which is like the source destination can be identified, and you can firewall administrator, okay, if these objects are not used, why don't you delete it? If it is used for future purpose, so is there any kind of approvals or any kind of exception that has been taken for that? Because this is basically just creating a complication on the firewalls, and it will be very partially won't be used in the future. So that kind of approvals need to be taken, and that can be removed as part of firewall rule set. And lastly, as I said, for each and every firewall rule got its own logging. So you need to check in the firewall rule set what are the different type of firewalls that has been enabled, the rules that has been enabled. So this basically can be identified through a column called log traffic, where you can check it to know, okay, whether the firewall rules has been logged or not logged. So if it is been enabled, that means it has been logged. But if you see any kind of disabled log, so you can identify that kind of rules, and that can be issued as a security issue that these rules have not been logged, and this can majorly face an issue. For example, if you are given some kind of RDP access of particular user, and that tools is not been logged, so you will not get to know what kind of action that has been performed through that users or from that account. So every logs that is very critical, it should be logged in the firewalls, and that will be used for any kind of post-incident forensics and network incidents. I think that's all from my end for the firewall rule set and review.
Thank you, Sukesh. Are there any questions on? Yeah, there is a question, Sukesh, if you can take that.
Why I'm not able to see the? Okay. Okay. Okay, the issue is I remember stating justification who added the rule and creation against each rule as well as best practice. So what is the question over here?
I think it's just observation.
Okay. So basically, whenever you create a rules for each rules, there's a firewall port access request that is raised. So in that you can get the change number for the particular firewalls and what are the justification that has been given for the firewall rule access. So that can be an evidence to check for each and every rules, and it can be used as evidence in case of if you want to delete or if you want to cross verify that rules who has created and what are the security checks that has been performed for particular rules. And this is basically a major practice that is followed across the organizations. Chain request is being followed. Any other questions?
Great. If there are no more questions, then thank you, Sukesh, for the presentation. And Prahlad, would you like to conclude?
Thank you, Sukesh and Samrat. Uh, Guys, I have just submitted one link in the chat. We are looking for more speakers for the next webinar. So it is a Google form link. You just submit your talk, how long you want to talk. There are different formats. If you want to give some workshop, it spans for like 2 hours or 4 hours. We can also arrange that. Everything can be done remotely. And all these slides for today will be uploaded to GitHub page, and the recordings will be shared on the YouTube channel. Rupam has already shared the link for the YouTube channel. In case still you're not able to figure it out, just ask in the chat or any of the team lead. He will get you the link for the YouTube channel. So within next 2-3 days, the video should be up. In case you missed something, and please submit for more speakers. We need some more speakers for the online. Earlier there was a challenge that you cannot come on site and something. Now you can. And the webinar is not only for the weekends. If you think that you can give the talk for 2 hours or 3 hours on a weekday, we'll try to arrange one of the guy from our end and we'll try to do the talk. It's not only for the weekends. That's all from my end, Rupam.
Yeah, and we can do 3-4 hours longer hands-on sessions as well
Yes.
on Zoom remotely. So those are also open options. We can explore that. So yes, thank you everyone for joining, and we will look forward to your feedback on WhatsApp channel or on Twitter handle, and look out for the videos on YouTube. And that's it. Thank you. I'll close it now. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.